Part 1. The story begins in a place where hope felt almost impossible to find. In a small, quiet neighborhood that most people barely noticed, there lived a young man whose life seemed to start several steps behind everyone else. While others around him had opportunities, support, and resources, he had almost nothing. No money, no powerful connections, and no special advantages that could make life easier. Every morning he woke up in the same tiny room with cracked walls and a window that barely let the sunlight in. It was the kind of place that constantly reminded him how far he was from the life he dreamed about. From the outside, his life looked ordinary, but inside he was fighting a silent battle. Every day felt like a test of patience and endurance. When he walked through the streets, he saw people his age moving forward in life, some going to good schools, some starting businesses, some already building careers. And sometimes, without even meaning to, he would compare himself to them. That comparison hurt, because deep down he knew he wanted more from life, but he simply didn't know where to start. Many nights he lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering why his life had begun this way. Why did some people start with so much while he started with almost nothing? Those questions circled his mind again and again. There were moments when doubt crept in quietly, whispering that maybe this was all life had planned for him. Maybe he was meant to struggle forever. But even in those difficult moments, something inside him refused to completely give up. During the day, he worked small, exhausting jobs just to survive. The kind of work that paid very little but demanded all of his energy. Sometimes he carried heavy loads for hours. Sometimes he worked long shifts that left him completely drained. By the time the day ended, his body was tired, his hands were rough, and his mind felt heavy. Yet despite the exhaustion, he kept going, because stopping was not an option. The hardest part was not the work itself. The hardest part was the feeling that his efforts were barely moving his life forward. Day after day felt the same. Work, sleep, wake up, and repeat. It was like running on a road that never seemed to lead anywhere. People around him didn't always understand his dreams either. Some laughed when he spoke about wanting a better future. Others told him to be realistic and accept the life he had. They believed that people like him were not meant to rise too high. After hearing those words again and again, it would have been easy for him to believe them. But deep inside, a quiet voice kept telling him that his story was not finished yet. He started noticing small moments around him that made him think differently. Sometimes he saw successful people on television or read stories about individuals who had once struggled just like him. Those stories planted a small seed in his mind. If someone else could rise from nothing, maybe he could too. Still, believing that possibility was not easy. Fear and doubt often returned, trying to pull him back into the comfort of giving up. There were days when the pressure felt overwhelming, when it seemed easier to accept defeat and stop dreaming altogether. Yet every time those thoughts appeared, he remembered the life he truly wanted. A life where he was not trapped by circumstances. A life where he could stand tall and prove that his beginning did not define his ending. Slowly, he began to understand something important. Waiting for luck would never change his life. Hoping for someone to rescue him would only waste more time. If anything was going to change, the change had to start with him. That realization did not instantly solve his problems, but it shifted something inside his mind. Instead of asking why his life was difficult, he began asking a different question. What small step could he take today that might move him forward? At first, the steps were tiny, so small that no one around him even noticed. But to him, they mattered. Each step represented a decision to keep trying, instead of giving up. Even though the road ahead was still uncertain, one thing had quietly changed. He was no longer just a man surviving day by day. A new determination was beginning to grow inside him. A determination that would soon push him toward a turning point he never expected. And that turning point would change the direction of his life forever. For a long time, life continued the same way. Long days of work, quiet nights filled with thoughts, and a future that still looked uncertain. But sometimes, the most important changes in life don't come from big events. They begin with a small moment, a simple realization that slowly changes the way a person sees the world. One evening, after another exhausting day, he sat alone outside his small room. The sky was turning dark, and the street around him was quiet. People were returning to their homes. Lights were turning on in the houses nearby, and the air carried the tired silence of the day ending. He sat there for a long time, thinking about his life, about the years that had already passed, and about where he was heading. For the first time, he asked himself a question he had never seriously considered before. If nothing changes, where will I be 5 years from now? The answer was uncomfortable. Deep down, he knew that if he kept living exactly the same way, his future would probably look exactly like his present. The same struggles, the same limitations, the same feeling of being stuck. That thought hit him harder than any criticism he had ever heard from others. At that moment, something inside him shifted. He realized that the biggest obstacle in his life might not be the lack of money, the lack of connections, or the difficult environment around him. The real obstacle was the belief that he was powerless to change anything. For years he had been waiting for the right opportunity, the right moment, or the right help to appear. But that night, he began to understand a powerful truth. Opportunities rarely come to people who are only waiting. They come to people who prepare for them. That realization didn't magically remove his problems, but it changed his mindset completely. Instead of focusing on everything he didn't have, he started thinking about what he could control: his time, his effort, his willingness to learn. The next day, something different happened. After finishing his work, instead of going straight to sleep like he always did, he spent a little time thinking about how he could improve himself. He didn't have expensive courses or professional teachers, but he had curiosity and determination. He started listening more carefully to people who had knowledge, observing how successful individuals thought and acted. Whenever he found a chance to learn something new, he took it seriously. Sometimes it was a conversation with someone experienced. Sometimes it was reading a small article or watching a video that explained an idea he had never heard before. These small pieces of knowledge slowly began to change the way he saw the world. He started realizing that successful people were not born with magical abilities. Many of them had once stood exactly where he was standing, confused, struggling, uncertain. The difference was that they chose to keep moving forward when others stopped. This idea gave him a strange kind of energy. For the first time, his future didn't feel completely out of his control. Yes, the road would still be difficult. Yes, he would still face failures. But now he understood that effort and discipline could slowly build a different life. So he made a quiet promise to himself. A promise that no matter how slow the progress was, he would improve a little every day. He began waking up earlier, using small pockets of time to think, learn, and plan. Instead of spending hours worrying about his problems, he started focusing on solutions. Instead of listening to people who only talked about limitations, he paid attention to ideas that encouraged growth. Of course, this new path was not easy. Some days he felt motivated and hopeful, but other days the old doubts tried to return. There were moments when his mind whispered that he was wasting his time, that nothing would really change. But each time those thoughts appeared, he remembered the question he had asked himself that quiet evening: where will I be if nothing changes? And that reminder pushed him to keep going. Gradually, the small actions he repeated every day began to build something powerful inside him. Confidence, discipline, patience. These qualities didn't appear overnight, but they grew stronger with each passing week. What he didn't realize yet was that this shift in mindset was the true turning point of his life. Success rarely begins with money or luck. It begins with a change in thinking. The moment he stopped seeing himself as a victim of his circumstances and started seeing himself as someone capable of growth, his journey truly began. And soon, that new mindset would lead him into the most challenging phase of his life, the long road of effort, failures, and relentless persistence that separates dreamers from achievers. Part 2. From that moment on, his life slowly began to move in a different direction. The change was not dramatic or visible at first. In fact, if someone looked at his life from the outside, it might still seem exactly the same. He still woke up in the same small room, still worked long hours, and still faced the same daily struggles. But inside his mind, something powerful had begun to grow. Every day he reminded himself of the promise he had made, to improve, even if the progress was small. Instead of waiting for the perfect opportunity, he focused on becoming better prepared for any opportunity that might come. He started using his free time wisely. While others around him rested or complained about their problems, he searched for ways to learn and grow. Sometimes that meant reading late at night when his body was already exhausted. Sometimes it meant practicing a skill again and again until he understood it better. There were moments when his eyes felt heavy with sleep, but he pushed himself to keep going just a little longer. He knew that the life he wanted would never come from comfort alone. Of course, the journey was far from smooth. The first attempts he made to improve his situation did not bring immediate success. In fact, many of them failed. He tried new ideas that didn't work. He made plans that fell apart. There were times when he believed he had finally found the right path, only to realize later that he had made another mistake. At first, those failures felt painful. Each one seemed like proof that the people who doubted him might have been right. On some nights, he felt the same old frustration creeping back into his mind, asking him why he was trying so hard when success still seemed so far away. But something had changed in the way he responded to those moments. Instead of seeing failure as the end of the road, he began to see it as part of the journey. Every mistake became a lesson. Every setback forced him to think deeper and adjust his approach. Slowly, he started understanding that growth often hides inside the very struggles people try to avoid. There were also people who continued to criticize him. Some friends told him he was wasting his energy chasing unrealistic dreams. Others laughed at his efforts and said he should focus only on surviving, not improving. Hearing those words was never easy. No one enjoys being doubted or misunderstood. Yet this time, he didn't allow those voices to control his decisions. He had already spent too many years letting circumstances define his limits. Now he was determined to discover what would happen if he kept pushing forward, even when others believed he would fail. Day by day, his discipline grew stronger. He developed habits that slowly changed the direction of his life. Waking up earlier, managing his time better, learning from every experience, and staying focused on his long-term goals. None of these actions were exciting or glamorous. In fact, most of them were simple and repetitive. But together, they built a foundation that would eventually support something much bigger. Months passed, and then years. During that time, he continued facing challenges that tested his patience